Welcome to the Renaissance, or what we sometimes call the early modern period. There are different names for this period in history, and they imply different stories about what went on and different priorities about the tale we tell. This video is designed to give you a short overview of the big picture of the historical period that Spenser and Shakespeare are living in. You've seen already, though Spenser seems to keep a lot of medieval habits, a lot of lists, a lot of things you remember from Chaucer, including that Y at the beginning of the past participle. I was idrad, someone was iclad in armor. The English language has actually changed enormously in the 200 years between Unit 1 and Unit 2, much more between Chaucer and Spenser and Shakespeare than it does between Spenser and Shakespeare and us. There's a reason for it, and that will come a little later in the video. This is the Renaissance. That name implies a rebirth. The old historical narrative is there's all this great classical learning and culture, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans. Then there's the Middle Ages. Why are they in the middle? What's middle? Like, they're in the middle. They're just the basically dark ages between the glories that were Greece and Rome, and the Renaissance, which is the French word for rebirth, which takes early modern Europe as having a rebirth of classical Greek and Roman culture. And that is part of the truth, but it's not the whole story. The Renaissance name prioritizes a historical narrative about the past. Old things were reborn, and some old things were rediscovered or given new priority in this period. We can also call this the early modern period, which emphasizes not how that period looked back to Greece and Rome, but how it looks forward to today. Hey, look, they're doing international trade. Hey, look, they're starting to have powerful nation states. They're starting to be like modern Europe and the modern Western world. Different stories, different narratives. Not for nothing, the dialect of English that Spenser and Shakespeare and Milton write in is early modern English. So the name early modern has, well, it has a good argument from linguistics. There's Old English, Beowulf. There's Middle English, Chaucer and his Pilgrim buddies. Then there's the early modern English in the early modern period of our friends, well, the rest of the course actually, of our friends Spenser, Shakespeare, Milton, and to a lesser extent our 18th century writers. Okay, 6 things about the Renaissance or early modern period. This is a period of scientific discovery. It's also a period where the scientific method hasn't come all the way out of the woods yet. So the Europeans actually in this period figure out that the Earth orbits the sun rather than the other way around, but they can't really decide. Copernicus has put forward his theory, and we're in the these writers are living through the fierce scientific debate. Does the sun go around the Earth the way we were always taught, the way the ancients believed, or is it that new crazy newfangled theory where we are actually orbiting the sun, which would explain some things about that can't be true. This will go on throughout this argument will go on throughout these writers' lifetimes. This is a period in history where we're figuring out that the Earth orbits the sun, but also pretty sure there are witches. Not convinced. Some people believe it, some people don't. It's up for grabs. Scientific discovery, but not all the way out yet. This is a moment of great rediscovery of Greek and Roman classical learning, especially Latin, the English, Shakespeare, Spenser, etc. They went to school, Milton, they went to school in Latin. They went to grammar school, which is Latin grammar school. The humanist movement is a movement that's about recovering lost Greek and Roman literature and values, and particularly about instructing people in how to speak Latin and Greek as schoolboys. One of the things this does, in the Middle Ages, Latin is a living language. It's continuing to change and grow. There's a medieval Latin, which is a different dialect than the Caesars spoke. Humanism says, no, let's go back and recover that really high quality Latin from about the 1st century AD. if you're a Christian, and most people in Europe were, there's a real value to that first century AD Latin. So people like Spenser and Shakespeare spent a lot of time in school reading, not just learning Latin, but learning the great Latin literature from the beginning of the first millennium of the Christian era. This is one of the reasons you will see an enormous amount of mythological reference in Shakespeare, Spenser, and Milton. If you get puzzled with all the classical mythology, I would recommend this book, Edith Hamilton's Mythology. It is inexpensive. It is in straightforward prose. It has an index. If you don't know who Venus and Adonis are, and by the end of Canto 1, you should have at least an idea. If you don't know who Phaeton is, but Phaeton keeps coming up, flip in the back. Who is Phaeton? What happened to Phaeton? Oh no, Phaeton. Bad times. It's a quick and dirty way to get caught up. I highly recommend it. I learned from it myself. Okay, the other thing that's happening, we're moving forward. The Europeans have invented movable type, the printing press, which they start immediately printing the Bible. Books become cheaper. There's a massive advance in literacy and a fast dissemination of knowledge, because books are much less expensive when you don't have to copy them out entirely by hand. It's fabulous. Relatively inexpensive print. Puts a lot, and it certainly puts a lot of learning out there very quickly. It leads to a lot of growth, a lot of debate. It's a new medium. Just as when we got the internet, we started to argue with each other online. As soon as people got the printing press, they started to argue with each other in pamphlets, leaflets, etc., like that. So, but an enormous intellectual leap forward from the rise of the printing press. With the rise of the printing press comes the Protestant Reformation and the associated European wars of religion. The name Reformation also is one of those names for a historical period that loads in a moral or a decision about who was right and who was wrong. It's only the Reformation if you think the religion beforehand needed to be reformed, which is the Protestants' idea of what happens. So Western Christianity has been one church, more or less ruled from Rome by a pope. Sometimes there are dueling rival popes, up to 3 popes sometimes, but in principle, there's a pope and he's in charge. And the Bible is in Latin. The Protestant Reformation makes a radical break from the Catholic past, decentralizing authority, no more pope, putting the Bible into people's own languages, into vernacular languages or vulgar languages. This is a great book. This is, we believe, the most important book in the world. Wouldn't it be great if we could read it in English? Not for nothing, the first book printed in movable type in Europe is the Bible, and it's in Latin by Herr Gutenberg. Let's translate the Bible and see for ourselves. Don't wait for the priest or, God help us, the Chaucer's like monk and nun to tell us what's in the Bible. Let's read that thing and start arguing. Now, this leads to a great deal of intellectual, philosophical, and theological debate. There's enormous progress. It's a moment of flowering intellectual debate. It also leads to incredible violence. All of our writers for the next 3 units are living through a period of vicious religious warfare, Christians versus other Christians, as the Catholics and the various forms of Protestants fight for control. That is state-on-state warfare. That involves what we would call terrorism. Hey, let's get a lot of gunpowder and put it under the Parliament building and blow up the king. Terrorism, religiously based terrorism. Assassinations. People are constantly plotting to kill Queen Elizabeth I so they can put somebody Catholic in her place. Then later, when she dies, they plot to kill James I to put someone Catholic in his place, hence the Guy Fawkes and the gunpowder under Parliament. 2 kings of France in a row get stabbed to death by religious fanatics. We have espionage, we have torture, we have people being burned alive for their beliefs. It is ugly. We have a moment, a bad moment, when every Protestant in Paris gets killed in a 3-day massacre giving the English language the word massacre. So we're having a fraught time. Religion is important, and we're willing, and Europeans are willing to kill each other over which flavor of Christianity is best. Spenser, like Milton and to some degree Shakespeare, are on the Protestant side. Spenser very clearly on the Protestant side. Milton very, very, very clearly on the Protestant side. Spenser's Faerie Queene is deliberately a work of Protestant propaganda. What else is going on? Well, what do you do in a country where the Pope's not in charge anymore? This also happens to be a period of rising nationalism. 16th and 17th century nationalism shouldn't be confused with 20th and 21st century nationalism. By nationalism here I mean a growing sense of national identity. Instead of thinking of yourself as part of Christendom, you think of yourself as French first, English first, Spanish first. We're English, and there's something national that we share that other countries don't. This is a relatively new idea, and you're seeing more of an investment in building national cultures and a sense of national group identity that goes along with stronger centralized government. Medieval feudalism tends to be, there are kings and queens, but they have they're constantly struggling with regional power brokers with the nobles. So, I mean, Chaucer lives through an unfortunate incident where the King of England gets deposed by one of his cousins and killed. And like, there's a solid 85 years of dynastic warfare for England from about 1399 to 1485. Different branches of the ruling family keep going at each other for the English throne. It's like Game of Thrones, except not entertaining in any way. In fact, Game of Thrones is partly based on that 85 years of English dynastic warfare. Under the Tudors, who come out on the winning side of those 85 years of warfare, under Henry VII, Henry VIII, Henry VIII's child, Elizabeth I, there's a concentration of power in the center, a stronger monarch, weaker nobles, more centralized government, and that's happening not just in England, but in all kinds of countries. Spenser certainly is interested in the Queen's patronage. He has dedicated the poem we're reading to Queen Elizabeth, his heroine. But it's not just national, things are getting international. This is also a period where Europeans figure out how to cross the oceans, and then we have another period. Here's another pair of dueling names. This is either the Age of Discovery, which bakes in a perspective where people don't know where they're, it's like that's the European perspective. We discovered these people. They had no idea they were there. Hello, do you like being discovered today? We found you. Also called the Age of Colonialism. There are very positive things that come out of this. There's trade, there's an enormous growth of wealth from international trade and shipping. There is contact with a kind of there's global contact. We're getting to Asia, Eastern Asia, much more easily. We're getting to Africa more often. We're getting to the Americas. But also the Europeans tend to take more than they give. So this is a period of imperial growth. Spenser certainly doesn't have a problem with that. He's got an empress he wants to run with, and her name is Elizabeth I. When we get to the Faerie Queene, we'll see how much he loves Elizabeth. Spoilers, a lot.